In a prison in Thailand, Lee is making a drawing by using paint from the wall mixed with water and feather tips that he keeps hidden in a book. He also makes a fake stamp that Lee puts on an envelope. Meanwhile, a guard is asking prisoners if they have any mail to send home, although he only takes letters from those who can bribe him. When he reaches Lee's cell, he's distracted by another prisoner throwing a fit, and Lee throws his envelope in the guard's bag. After the guard is gone, Lee thanks the other prisoner, revealing that he misbehaved as a distraction. At that moment, a guard comes to take Lee out of his cell, saying that he's been extradited to Hong Kong. Lee travels with Detective Ho in a convoy and watches everyone carefully. At the police station, detectives go over the details of an old case. 2 years ago, 7 armored truck guards were killed on a Canadian highway. 4 months later, the Golden Triangle Merlin guerrilla was attacked, resulting in 82 dead and 157 injured. Last year, there was a murder arson at a printing mill. Later at a hotel, a cop and an art dealer were found dead. All these murders are connected to an international counterfeit syndicate, and most of its members were killed. Only 2 survivors remain, Lee and his boss known as Painter. His identity and location are a total mystery, so the police only have one blurry photo of him in Canada. Ho asks Lee for information about Painter, but Lee is afraid that he'll get killed if he talks and starts crying. Suddenly an explosion blows up the office, bringing the ceiling down on Lee and the cops. However, this is just Lee explaining what Painter is capable of. Ho isn't scared, so Lee starts freaking out, asking to be sent back to jail. A detective takes him to a cell and punches him. Moments later, Lee is given some food, which has a sedative that knocks him out. The cops use the chance to get hair, skin, saliva, and blood samples. When Lee wakes up, he's taken back to Ho's office. A detective explains that the samples match the shooting at the hotel, so Lee will be charged with murder. Lee freaks out as he claims that the evidence is fake and says they can't scare him into talking. Ho tries to threaten Lee, but she's interrupted by the officer who informs her of an important meeting. In another office, Ho discovers that famous artist Yuen and her lawyers want to bail Lee out. The lawyers point out that the evidence isn't very good and they can tell Lee is being set up, but the police still refuse to let him go. Instead, they offer a deal. If Yuen convinces Lee to talk about Painter, they'll release him. In the interrogation room, Yuen tells Lee about the deal. He reminds her that talking would put them in danger, but Yuen wants the cops to catch Painter because he killed her fiancé. Lee agrees to talk just to help her, so he sits in front of the camera and starts sharing his story. In 1985, Lee meets Yuen in Vancouver. They're both talented painters trying to have a career, but nobody wants to buy their art. A decade later, they barely have any money to survive and their home loses power because of unpaid bills. Desperate for real income, Lee goes to an art gallery and makes a deal to create counterfeit paintings. When he goes home, he overhears Yuen talking to her manager. The man admires Yuen's creative art but insults Lee's, saying he only copies other artists. However, Yuen doesn't want him to represent her if he doesn't take Lee as well. That night, Lee turns on the lights, revealing he paid the bill because a gallery has bought all his paintings. As part of the deal, he's gotten a solo show for Yuen next month. Sometime later, Yuen goes to the gallery workshop to visit Lee and discovers that his new job is forging art, not creating it. She thinks he doesn't give his skills enough credit, but Lee has given up on regular art and explains that doing these forgeries is actually thrilling. Yuen says she loves him, but she's very disappointed in him. Yuen's art show lasts many days, but Lee doesn't show up until the last one. He's annoyed because she's hung up one of his paintings along with hers without his permission. Yuen claims some collectors are interested in it, but Lee knows that she's sold everything except that one. At that moment, Painter starts mocking Lee's painting for imitating the classic art masters. Guests laugh, but Yuen throws a drink in his face and kicks him out. Lee follows him to apologize, only for Painter to reveal he bought one of Lee's copies. He made a scene on purpose to talk to him in private. They go to a bar and Lee talks about his forging techniques that help his art look old. Painter explains he's in the forging business and wants Lee to work with him, so he leaves him his card. In the gallery, Yuen is arguing with her manager. He's angry that she ruined her show by making a scene and that they can't declare a total sold out because Lee's painting is the only one left. Suddenly, Lee enters the gallery and proceeds to burn his painting. The next day, Lee contacts Painter, who welcomes him to the team before giving him his first job, to recreate a $100 bill. Lee freaks out, refusing to do something so dangerous. Painter promises that the job won't be linked to him and shares some secrets to gain his trust. His name is Fuck Sang and he comes from 3 generations of counterfeiters from Hong Kong. Nobody in his family has ever gone to jail and they always play by the rules. His team only does distribution and his buyers are powerful people who keep him protected. However, Lee still refuses to participate. When Lee gets home, he discovers that Yuen is moving to the USA. This makes him change his mind, so moments later he's on a plane to Thailand with Fuck Sang, who promises to help Lee get Yuen back. Then he shares some details about the job. The US government released a new dollar bill design with more details that even include microprinted words, which has made it difficult to forge. Lee says they'll need a more meticulous printing plate, so Fuck Sang introduces him to plate maker Yam. The team also has administrator Wah and brothers Shum and Bobby for logistics and security. Wah mentions that they'll need color shifting ink and Yam wants starch-free paper to trick the counterfeit detector pens. Its ink turns purple on normal paper, but yellow on starch-free paper from bills. Fuck Sang promises he'll figure it out. Meanwhile, he wants Lee to concentrate on the watermark, which is made from the fibers between the paper. In Thailand, the team settles in an abandoned workshop. Lee spends several days practicing the details from the dollar bills, from the letters to the strands of hair. Eventually he achieves a perfect result. One night during dinner, the team looks at a Chinese painting and bets money on its authenticity. Most of the team thinks it's fake, but Lee thinks it's real and even tells them about the technique behind it. Chinese artists can cut up their paintings into layers and yet the paint will be identical in all of them. Lee wins the bet and Fuck Sang explains that they'll use that method for their bills. They'll push the pattern with an iron drum before the pulp hardens. Once it's hard, the pattern will become the watermark and they'll sandwich it between two other layers. Yam points out that they can put the security thread in the middle layer too. For the next few weeks, the team works on the precision of the details. They mix colors to find the right shade of paint, and Yam uses all his knowledge to make a plate that paints with 1/1000th of a millimeter precision. It takes them 2 months and 17 prototypes to reach the perfect one. Lee enjoys working with Yam and uses the chance to ask questions about Fuck Sang. Yam confirms that nobody in the family was ever arrested, although Fuck Sang's father argued with some Russians over money and was killed. Yam shows Lee a picture of his daughters, explaining that they think he sells antiques. They still are missing the paper, but Wah couldn't find anything that passes the pen test. Fuck Sang announces they'll solve this by traveling to Eastern Europe. It turns out they use starch-free paper to print phone books because there it's not regulated like in the USA. First they stop at an auction to buy an industrial printer. Then Fuck Sang puts on a disguise to pretend to be a disabled man and claims to work for a charity that prints educational comic books. He talks to the boss of a phone book manufacturing company, who at first refuses to sell to them. However, he changes his mind when Lee tells him this is for the kids in Africa. Soon the printer and all the paper are in the workshop. In just a matter of minutes, they manage to print a realistic dollar bill. They only need to fix the shade of the ink. Sometime later Lee returns to Vancouver to drop off his key, leaving it on a desk because he refuses to meet Ewan. On the drive back, Fuck Sang calls Lee a coward and points out that Ewan's very successful show is named after the painting Lee burned. An argument ensues and Fuck Sang stops the car to yell at Lee, saying that giving up on Ewan is giving up on himself. Suddenly Fuck Sang leaves the car and puts on a mask before pulling out a gun. On his seat, Lee finds a bulletproof vest and a second gun. There's an armored car in the middle of the road and when a guard sees the guys, he opens fire. Lee panics and puts on the vest while Fuck Sang shoots back, quickly killing one of the guards. However, he fails to bring down the others, so one of his men has to shoot them from a distance. He also shoots the tires of the armored car. The rest of the team shows up in a vehicle and together they overpower the security employees. After they tie them up, they open the armored car and steal several cans of ink. Another guard is hiding behind the cans and Lee freezes at the sight of his gun. Fuck Sang pushes him out of the way and is thrown back by a bullet. Furious, he starts shooting repeatedly to kill the guy, ignoring his men when they tell him to let it go. Before they leave, Fuck Sang blows up the armored car with all the employees inside. At the workshop, Lee shows his disapproval of killing for their business and says he'll leave the team after figuring out how to make ink with the right shade. Fuck Sang throws his glass on the ground in fury but sarcastically tells Lee to do whatever he wants. Afterward, Fuck Sang travels all over the world to deliver suitcases of fake money to some of the biggest crime lords. Soon the team has huge piles of real money to enjoy. Meanwhile, Lee finds a car with the exact shade of green they need. He acquires the paints that the car factory uses and manages to mix a tone that works perfectly with their paper. Now they won't have to steal paint again. One day, the team is visited by people sent by a Thai crime boss known as the General. Fuck Sang has a drink with the General's right hand and his counterfeit expert Cao Ching, who admires the quality of the bill's art. At that moment Lee walks down the corridor and accidentally trips, spilling green paint all over the glass door. As he looks up, he shares a look with Cao Ching. After the visitors leave, Fuck Sang yells at Lee, but he calms down when he realizes that they've perfected the paint. The next day, Fuck Sang tells Lee that he bought a resort under his name so he can retire with Ewan. They travel to a compound in the middle of nowhere and meet with the General. Fuck Sang hands Lee a detonator, telling him to hide it until he gives him a signal. While walking around the compound, Lee is terrified to see guards shooting civilians. The General tries to make a good deal with Fuck Sang, claiming that he used to be good friends with his father. However, Fuck Sang knows that the General hired the Russians who killed his father and reveals he came here for revenge. He opens his jacket to reveal some explosives and tells Lee to drop the detonator. At first Lee refuses, but since the guards are threatening to shoot, he has no choice but to drop it anyway. A car explodes near them, destroying the room but failing to kill anyone. The General tries to run away so Fuck Sang shoots him in the leg. A few guards surround him but Fuck Sang fights them and takes their guns to kill them. More guards appear outside and take the General away while starting a shootout with Fuck Sang. After lots of wasted bullets, the guards throw a grenade. Fuck Sang rolls out of the room right before it explodes. Then Fuck Sang manages to kill several guards and ends up getting shot in the shoulder. When more men come after him, Shum starts bombing the compound from afar, destroying most of the buildings and killing most of the army. Fuck Sang gets bigger guns and starts shooting down the survivors, not stopping even when he's wounded again. Unfortunately, more soldiers keep coming, so Fuck Sang is forced to hide behind a pile of bags. At that moment, the rest of the team bursts into the compound in a jeep, throwing grenades to cause more destruction. In the woods, Shum is trying to run away but the soldiers surround him and open fire, causing him to lose his arm. This fallen hand loses its grip on a grenade and it blows up, killing all the guards with one explosion. At the compound, Lee notices that Cao Qing is caught on fire. He runs into a burning building just to put out the flames with his jacket, then he carries her out. Fuck Sang and the team keep shooting guards until the general appears in a truck to fire back. Bobby pushes Fuck Sang and is knocked out instead. Then Fuck Sang makes a risky jump to shoot the truck driver, followed by a shot at the tires. This causes the truck to crash and the general finally dies. Fuck Sang takes the general's ring and allows Lee to bring Cao Qing with them. On their way out, the last explosion finishes destroying the area. Afterward the team stays hidden for a year in the Golden Triangle. Cao Qing is taken to the hospital to heal her injuries and Fuck Sang gets her a fake passport with Yuan's name. Lee doesn't approve, but Fuck Sang ignores him. Sometime later at an art gallery, Fuck Sang buys all of Yuan's paintings and tells Lee he'll send them to the resort so he can impress her. However, Lee thinks Yuan won't like receiving dirty money. When Lee starts to scold him, they're interrupted by some reporters following Yuan to ask her about her engagement to her manager. The news upset Lee so he leaves. Meanwhile the Hong Kong police calls Wing Chit, a counterfeit expert from the Canadian Federal Police. Ho has been trying to find the gang that has been putting fake dollar bills in the market all over the world, so Wing Chit will help her. Together they start watching an antique store that belongs to Yam. Later Ho and Wing Chit pretend to be potential buyers and start talking to various brokers until they're invited to a boat party that the infamous Painter is supposed to attend. However, they're disappointed to discover that Painter has sent Shum and Bobby instead of coming himself. Wing Chit pretends to be aggressively offended and the brothers bring out their guns just to test him. When they tease Ho, Wing Chit immediately defends her and proves he's cool by jumping into the water with her. The brothers agree he's trustworthy, so Hua appears on another boat and throws a bag with a phone, telling Wing Chit to wait for a call. At the same time in a yacht, Fuck Sang argues with Lee because he's discovered that he's leaving with Cao Qing without his approval. A furious Fuck Sang grabs Lee and seems he's about to attack, but he's interrupted by the team announcing that the new clients are ready. They tell him that these clients are vouched for by one of Yam's antique clients, causing Fuck Sang to remember Wing Chit hanging outside the store. The team rushes back to the workshop and Yam learns that one of his clients set him up. Yam begs for mercy but Fuck Sang shoots him to death anyway. Lee freaks out and Fuck Sang tries to shoot him too, however Lee grabs the gun and the shot misses. Fuck Sang punches him instead. Afterward the team burns down the workshop to get rid of all evidence. Later in the city, Ho puts trackers in Wing Chit's watch and phone before he meets with the Painter, unaware that the gang knows they're cops. After he leaves, Ho looks at his lighter and finds a note asking her out. In a hotel, Wing Chit meets with the team and Fuck Sang tries to sell him the plate instead of the forged bills, saying he's retiring from the business. Since Wing Chit turns him down, Fuck Sang asks Lee to kill him. Since Lee hesitates, Wing Chit jumps on him to try to get the gun, only for Fuck Sang to shoot him down. Then Fuck Sang gets angry because Lee continues to be a coward. He drags him to the bedroom and reveals that he's captured Yuan and her fiancé, who are tied up and blindfolded. Fuck Sang tells Lee to kill the manager, however Lee points the gun at him instead. Fuck Sang knows he won't dare and proceeds to kill the manager, so Lee runs to rescue Yuan. The whole team opens fire while the duo takes cover. Suddenly Cao Qing shows up and stabs Hua from behind, causing her to shoot a chandelier that crashes on the table. Then she uses Hua's gun to kill the brothers, but Fuck Sang manages to hide behind the door. When Fuck Sang offers Lee for his freedom, Lee finally is brave enough to shoot Fuck Sang in the chest several times. Lee doesn't want to abandon Yuan, however Cao Qing convinces him they're in danger so they leave together. Afterward Lee and Cao Qing hide in the resort. They follow the news and learn that the police didn't find Fuck Sang's body, also Yam's whole family was killed. One day Lee informs Cao Qing he's leaving because Yuan will hold a memorial for her fiancé and he's afraid that Fuck Sang will attack her there. In the city, he tries to pay for a cafe with forged money but the cops surround him and beat him up. When Lee is dragged to the police van, he sees Fuck Sang nearby waving a flyer for Yuan's show. In the present, Lee finishes his story and helps a cop make sketches of Cao Qing and Fuck Sang. Ho grants him bail but he must stay in town and report to the police every day. That night in the hotel, Lee apologizes to Yuan and they get naughty. Meanwhile Ho is shocked to see Fuck Sang arrive in a police uniform and enter the station. She immediately sends her men to capture him but the guy is genuinely confused. He tells them all his personal information, confirming he's just a normal cop. Ho realizes that Lee saw him when they took him out of prison and used his description to lie during the story. It turns out there's no Fuck Sang. Lee was the Painter all along. The woman who came to rescue him wasn't the real Yuan, it was Cao Qing. When Lee took her to the hospital to heal her burns, he asked the surgeons to make her look like his ex. Lee's letter had been for her and included a portrait of her original face. Cao Qing was the one who kidnapped Yuan and her fiancé, saying that if she had to replace Yuan, the real one had to die. Lee survived the shootout, thanks to a bulletproof vest and stabbed Hua. It was Cao Qing he saw on the street when he was arrested. Now Lee and Cao Qing escape from the country on a boat, however Cao Qing becomes tired of being Yuan's replacement because Lee will never love the real her. She calls the police and soon they're surrounded. The boat also has a bomb, and Cao Qing detonates it so they both die in front of the cops. Sometime later Ho finds the real Ewan and tells her that her fiancé's killer is dead while showing her a picture of Lee. Ewan reveals that Lee had been a creepy neighbor obsessed with her, so their relationship had also been a lie. He entered the forging business hoping to win her over. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.